Leadership is a very philosophical concept. I'm a businessman. I think in business you like to do things and you like to plan actions. So I'm skeptical of thinking too philosophical about concepts and not about implementation. I mean, ultimately leadership is about getting other people to do what you think they should do. And everybody does that every day. So in a sense, everybody is a leader. And in business, there's a structure, there's a hierarchy, it's different, it's not leadership. And universities, for instance, a very different organization from a business. But in a business environment, I've learned a few tricks of the trade. I don't think they're important, terribly important, but not necessarily true in every situation. But for instance, I think if you want people to do something, you've got to be very clear about what you expect of people. You've got to have a clear plan. You can't ask people to work a plan if they don't know what the plan is. I've also felt that it works well. You've got to know everybody well. You've got to know your situation and your people. If you tell people what to do and you don't understand the situation, you don't understand their problems, you quite often end up like a schoolmistress. You're simply unhappy with the results and always scolding people like children, which I think is counterproductive. If you deal intelligently with people, they reward their intelligence. In other words, I think leadership is much more about substance than about style. There's not a trick of leadership. If you know exactly what you want to do, I've seen a lot of very smart leaders. I'm talking business. Politics is different, university is different, students' affairs is different. But I've seen very smart leaders who at first glance don't at all seem impressive. They're not people, when they tell jokes, it's not very funny. When they make speeches, they're not very comfortable. And yet they know exactly what they want to do. And when they sit down with their team and they discuss matters and they make plans, they end up and people say, now that can work. And they inspire them and they have huge successes. So if there's one thing I would say leadership is much more about substance than style. People who think about style, quite often to me at least, they seem very superficial leaders. They tell people, let's do it, but they don't explain really what to do and how to do it. I don't believe in threatening people. I don't think it ever works really to try and catch out people that do something wrong and then threaten them with dire consequences. In practice, if you have smart people, you should reward them when they do well. And if people don't do well, and if they're not smart enough for your team, then you must get rid of them. Nothing is more powerful than getting rid of people. That's a very powerful message in business. And that's much better than a threat and all sorts of dire consequences. Capitec's the single reason for the success of Capitec has been in the word focus. We've done very few things and tried to do them very well. And we've tried to standardize. I mean, for instance, our branches are all pretty much the same size. We don't have giant branches and small branches and satellite branches. In my mind, who really is the creator of Capitec Bank is the CEO. He's just retired, Rian Stassen. And Rian was with me at Capitec Bank, at Boland, that's the Distillers Corporation. He was head of production by the time we left there. And then he was really an operational guy, but with the qualification of a CA. And when he came into Boland Bank, he sort of simply, he was more of a numbers guy than a real hard asset guy. So whereas he had been successful in production of liquor, when he came into the world of it's a virtual world, you know. When you say virtual products, people always think very exotic new things. But a thing like a savings account or a loan is really a virtual product. It's not a physical product. It's something that's conceptualized in your mind and you can describe it mathematically, but you can't touch it. And you will be surprised how many people find that difficult to deal with. Anybody can pack 12 bottles of liquor into a crate, but if you give them numbers and concepts to work with, you find that a lot of people simply, it doesn't appeal to them. And Rian loved it, so he flourished in that environment, and we met a few guys that we thought were very smart, particularly the IT guy who's just retired, and he's been with Boland his whole life. And then when at a stage we started Capitec Bank, Boland had been taken over by Nedbank, and Nedbank had decided to close down the Paul headquarters, move it to Johannesburg, and all these old Cape Townians didn't want to go, so we could pull in a lot of them. And having worked there gave us the advantage that we knew with the smart guys, so we could say we want you and you and you. So the transition it's big, it's different, but to some extent it's not as big as you think. It goes about organization, about logic, about managing people, training people. So it's sometimes it looks massive, in some respects it is, but sometimes it's actually very similar. You're dealing with teams of people. You've got to work out plans, you've got to... The biggest difference I would say, the funny thing about banking is that if you look at the movies, you see these guys doing a big deal, and now they've signed. Then they jump up and they say thank you to the banker who's providing $1 billion to buy the other company. Now just think of that. You've just given this bank $1 billion worth of business, and you're saying them. In every other business, when you buy something, you buy a big new car, the salesman says, thank you for supporting my company. Here's a bottle of champagne. But in banking, the relationship is inverted. The people want to borrow from the bank, and that's a privilege. So they treat the bank as though the bank is more important than they are. The client should always be more important. And that's a very difficult thing to do. We found, for instance, that our staff become arrogant. They deal with people condescendingly. If people want loans, they will ask them what for, and do you really think it's necessary? And I don't think you should do this. And so at Capitec Bank, we simply said, you never ask anybody what for. That's a humiliating question. It's his money. If he can repay it, whether he wants to buy beer or wants to take his son to university, it's his choice. Treat him like a grown-up. Don't treat him like condescending. And so that, to my mind, is the biggest difference between selling liquor and selling. In the liquor world, you never forget that the client is king. In the banking world, the staff ends up thinking they're the kings. The staff is sort of there to help the customers. Must pay obeisance to the bank and not the other way. As you grow, lots of things needs to be done, and you don't want entrepreneurship, and you just want efficiency. So a big part of the organization focuses on efficiency and action, and applying the current rules, and to create. So what we do is we create small teams of people, often ad hoc teams. In other words, we'll take 3 or 4 people out of different departments and put them together and say you've got 3 months to look at the future of mobile banking and go overseas and attend this conference and peek and think out of the box. But it remains a challenge, because even when such teams can feed in interesting ideas, but ultimately the organization must make a choice whether it's going to accept those ideas and those proposals. And some things I think we remain very active, we're aware of it. Other things, as we've discussed now about expanding outside of the borders of South Africa, we've simply found we don't have the capacity. I mean, there's a lot to be learned from established companies. So the idea of working for a company for a number of years and learning and seeing what they do and how they do it is interesting. There's always a challenge, and that challenge is that if If you're a smart person and you work for a company and you get regular raises and interesting challenges, and when you look back, you suddenly realize you've been there for 15 years and you wanted to start a business, but every time you think maybe I should start, you've got a new opportunity and a nice big bonus, this and that. And so good employment can be, it can take away the entrepreneurial spirit. At the same time, you're sometimes very naive. When you start, when I speak to young people, they sometimes come with ideas that's really very patently impractical. You think if this guy just worked for a few months in the industry, you would have realized this idea is not a good idea. So I don't know exactly where to start. It's a very, being creative can be a very lonely process. It can also be a very it's a challenge to know exactly when you've got a good idea and when you've got a bad idea, and when you must give up and when you must persevere. I can't really give you advice of how you find the middle balance between those conflicting views points.
Oh, you're pretty good.